People love to repeat the phrase "innovate or die" as if it were a clever slogan you print on startup hoodies or shout on stage at conferences. But if you've ever built something in the real world, something fragile, something hungry, something that wakes you at 3 a.m. with the fear of becoming irrelevant, you know innovation isn't a slogan. It's survival. It's oxygen. It's the difference between becoming a company that shapes the future and becoming a footnote buried beneath the companies that did. I learned this lesson in the ugliest way possible, by almost watching my own startup rot from the inside because we confused momentum with innovation. In the beginning, our product felt electric. Every update sparked excitement. Every experiment carried possibility. We were bold, reckless, hungry. But as we grew, as the headcount increased and investors started praising us, something subtle and dangerous began to happen. We became comfortable. Comfort is the poison that kills startups quietly. It starts small. You stop talking to users as often. You delay the hard decisions. You optimize instead of reinventing. And slowly, the fire that built the company becomes a candle flickering in a room full of wind. I remember the exact moment I realized we were in trouble. We were in a board meeting, celebrating record numbers, when one of our junior engineers, barely 2 years out of school, looked at a competitor's product and muttered, almost too softly to hear, "We're falling behind." The room went silent, not because she was wrong. Everyone in that room already felt it, but because she had the courage to say the thing the rest of us had been avoiding. That was the moment I understood something brutal. Innovation doesn't die when competitors win. It dies when teams stop telling the truth. After that meeting, I walked through our office with new eyes. What once felt alive now felt mechanical. Processes everywhere, structure everywhere, predictability everywhere. But innovation isn't born in predictability. It's born in messy rooms filled with half-baked ideas, bad sketches, uncomfortable disagreements, and the kind of hunger that makes you question everything you've ever built. We'd lost that hunger, and so I did what founders dread most. I tore apart what we had built, not the product, our mindset. We dissolved teams that had grown complacent. We killed projects that looked good on slide decks but meant nothing to users. We reopened customer interviews, not with fancy frameworks, but with humility and fear in our voices. Because if you want to stay ahead of the curve, you must be willing to destroy the version of your company that built yesterday's success. People think innovation is about creativity. It isn't. Innovation is about courage. Specifically, the courage to admit that what worked yesterday will not keep you alive tomorrow. We built an internal rule that changed everything. No feature, no process, no assumption is sacred. And almost immediately, the friction started. The best kind of friction. Designers argued with engineers. Product managers clashed with data analysts. Our team stayed late, not because of deadlines, but because ideas were colliding fast enough to generate heat. That heat became momentum. But innovation is also a war against time, and time is the enemy that never loses. While we rebuilt our internal culture, competitors began to sprint. One of them launched a feature that made our product look ancient, like someone had taken the future and slapped us across the face with it. My team panicked. Investors panicked. Even I felt the dread crawling up my spine. And yet, in that moment of fear, something unexpected happened. Clarity. Because when a competitor humiliates you publicly, you're forced to confront the truth privately. We gathered the team for a meeting. Not a panic meeting, but a battle council. We printed out every complaint, every negative review, every reason users were flocking to the competitor. Then we did something most companies are too proud to do. We listened. Not defensively, not strategically. We listened with the humility of people who knew the market didn't owe us survival. Innovation begins when ego ends. What followed was one of the most painful, transformative stretches of my life. We rebuilt our product from the inside out, not because it was failing, but because we were failing to evolve. The team worked like their lives depended on it, and in a way, they did. Startups don't die because they run out of money. They die Because they run out of meaning. Our meaning returned through reinvention. But innovation isn't just about product, it's about people. So I made it a point to surround myself with individuals who challenged me, who weren't afraid to call my ideas stale or outdated. The most important hire I ever made wasn't the most brilliant. It was the one who told me, on his first week, "This company is too slow." He was right. Innovation requires speed, not reckless speed, but fearless speed. The kind that understands hesitation becomes regret in markets that move at light speed. Yet speed alone doesn't keep you ahead. Reinvention must become part of your identity. We instituted failure days, where teams showcased experiments that didn't work. We rewarded attempts, not just outcomes. We documented mistakes openly, treating them as fuel rather than shame. Slowly, innovation became culture instead of crisis. But just when we thought we were ahead of the curve again, the world shifted beneath us. A new technology emerged, something that threatened the core of our product. Investors demanded answers. Competitors scrambled, customers grew nervous, and once again the fear returned. But this time, something was different. We were ready. Innovation had become our muscle. Instead of panicking, we adapted. Instead of defending the old, we embraced the new. Instead of resisting disruption, we used it as leverage. That moment changed everything for us, not because we avoided disruption, but because we chose to evolve with it. And that is the truth no one wants to hear. Innovation is not a moment. It is a posture. It is the willingness to walk into uncertainty again and again until uncertainty becomes familiar. It is the decision to push forward when every instinct tells you to protect what you already have. It is the discipline to question everything, even the things that work, especially the things that work. Looking back now, at the near-death moments, the reinventions, the humiliation, the breakthroughs, the nights spent rebuilding features from scratch because the world had changed while we slept, one thing becomes painfully clear. Staying ahead of the curve is not about winning. It's about refusing to be left behind. The startups that survive aren't the smartest. They aren't the best funded. They aren't even the most innovative. They are the ones who treat innovation as a survival instinct, who evolve so frequently, so aggressively, so relentlessly, that the curve eventually stops being something they chase and becomes something they shape. And as I stand here remembering the countless times we reinvented ourselves, sometimes successfully, sometimes disastrously, I can feel that familiar pressure again, the whisper that every founder hears sooner or later. The next disruption is already forming, and the question isn't whether you see it coming, but whether you're brave enough to become the one who creates it. And right as that thought settled into my bones, I realized the next breakthrough wouldn't come from defending what we had built, but from daring to ask the question bold enough to shatter the comfortable illusions we had built around ourselves and force us back into the wild, terrifying territory where real innovation is born. Because that's the truth no founder wants to admit. Breakthroughs rarely emerge from brilliance. They emerge from discomfort. Discomfort shakes you awake. Discomfort tells you the world is shifting. Discomfort demands evolution. The companies that listen survive. The ones that ignore it die with perfect pitch decks and outdated visions. In that moment, as the question formed in my mind, I felt the familiar electricity, the same raw, trembling energy I had felt the first day I ever sketched the idea that became our company. Innovation, I realized, is not a phase. It is a return to curiosity, a return to insecurity, a return to the version of yourself who had nothing to protect and everything to prove. And so I asked the question. The kind that made half the room lean forward and the other half flinch. The kind that threatens the identity of a company because it challenges the assumptions that keep it comfortable. What if, I said, everything we've built is wrong for where the world is going? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind that carries both fear and possibility. One of my senior executives looked at me like I had just set fire to the foundation we stood on. Another nodded slowly, eyes widening, already imagining futures that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. Innovation begins in moments like that, not when everyone agrees, but when the room fractures and curiosity slips through the cracks. We broke into groups, diving ruthlessly into what the next era of our industry would demand. We tore apart our roadmap, not because it was bad, but because it was too safe. We studied emerging technologies, not as threats, but as invitations. We interviewed users not to confirm our biases, but to learn where their lives were heading. And little by little, a new picture emerged. A future that made our current success look embarrassingly small. That's the paradox of staying ahead of the curve. When you finally glimpse the next curve, everything you've built suddenly feels outdated. And accepting that truth requires humility most companies never develop. We spent the next 12 months reinventing ourselves again. Not a pivot, an evolution. A shift so fundamental that, from the outside, it looked like overnight brilliance. But inside, it was blood, sweat, insecurity, and the bone-deep fear of betting everything on something that might still fail. Innovation demands that kind of bet. Safe companies optimize. Brave companies reinvent. And I had decided long ago that I would rather die building something ahead of its time than live watching someone else build the future I was too afraid to chase. But here's the twist that no one prepares you for. When you innovate aggressively, you don't just disrupt your market, you disrupt yourself. Some employees left. They said the pace was too intense, the uncertainty too heavy. I didn't blame them. Reinvention is not for everyone. Some investors panicked. They preferred predictable curves and linear growth. I understood that too. Innovation rarely produces straight lines. But the people who stayed, the ones who leaned into the unknown with me, became the sharpest team I've ever worked with. Hungry, fearless, unreasonable in the best possible way. And together, we built something new, not perfect, not complete, but alive. Alive with possibility, alive with tension, alive with the kind of energy that tells you you're no longer following the market. You're creating the part of it that didn't exist before. When we finally launched our new product line, the reactions stunned us. Not because it succeeded instantly, but because it polarized everyone. Some users hated it. Some loved it, but no one ignored it. Indifference is the enemy of innovation. Controversy is the cost of leading. Over the following months, the product matured, the market caught up, and slowly, the thing that once felt risky began to feel inevitable. That's when you know you've truly innovated, when the world starts calling obvious what once looked impossible. But innovation's reward is never comfort. The moment the market adapts to your brilliance, it becomes the new baseline. The curve rises again, and suddenly you're behind unless you're already working on the next disruption. And so we kept pushing. We institutionalized reinvention so deeply that innovation ceased being a project and became our identity. Teams challenged norms as naturally as breathing. Leaders debated strategy with intensity but without ego. Failure became information. Risk became routine. The company that once drifted toward comfort had become something entirely different, a machine built to evolve. And yet, despite all our progress, the hardest lesson was still ahead of me. One evening, after a long strategy session, I stayed alone in the office, staring at the city lights. For the first time in years, we were ahead of every competitor. We were the curve, and instead of feeling triumphant, I felt uneasy. Because I finally understood the most brutal truth of all. Innovate or die doesn't just apply to companies, it applies to founders. You cannot lead your company into the future if you cling to the version of yourself that built the past. The founder who creates a product is not the founder who scales it. The founder who scales it is not the founder who reinvents it. To stay ahead, you must constantly shed versions of yourself like a snake shedding skin. Every era demands a new identity, a new courage, a new willingness to question everything you've become comfortable doing. That night I asked myself the same question I had asked my team months earlier. What if the founder I am today is wrong for where the world is going? The question hurt. It exposed every insecurity I thought I had buried. But innovation always begins where pride ends. And in that quiet, uncomfortable moment, I made a decision. I would evolve again. I would learn again. I would question everything again, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Staying ahead of the curve is a lifelong war against stagnation, a war fought not just in product rooms and strategy meetings, but inside your own mind. If there's anything my journey has taught me, it's this. The future belongs to those who are willing to reinvent themselves as often as they reinvent their companies. If this story challenged you, poked you, or forced you to confront truths you've been avoiding, tell me in the comments which part hit hardest. And if you want more raw, unfiltered lessons from the trenches, hit follow because the next curve is already forming and you'll want to be ready when it arrives.